Intro Algebra Lesson 2-8A. We're going to switch gears a little bit and we're going to talk about probability. And the idea behind probability is the measure of likelihood that an event is going to take place or actually going to happen. It can be anywhere between 0 and 1. 0 for a probability means it will not happen. For example, I've got this bag, it's full of marbles. Some of the marbles are green, some of the marbles are yellow. What's the likelihood, probability, that I close my eyes, reach into that bag and pull out a black marble? Well, if the bag's full of yellow and green marbles, there's no way I'm going to pull out a black marble. That probability is 0. All right? Probability of 1, if the bag is full of white marbles and I close my eyes and reach into that bag and mill around, what's the probability I pull out a white marble? Guaranteed. They're all white marbles. So that's for sure going to happen. If you're flipping a coin, you could get heads and you could get tails. And there's an equal chance for either one, so that's 50-50. It's kind of in the middle. So probability has to do with the likelihood it'll happen. And we use probability all the time to determine whether or not something is, is it worthwhile? Is it worth the risk? Should I give it a shot? Probability I'm going to get it right, the probability I'm going to succeed. I want you to remember probability as this little saying, fave over pos. And I'll get into what those mean in a moment. Just remember fave over pos, fave over pos. I can guarantee you, you will have some form of probability problem on your state testing, and you want to be able to remember quickly, fave over pos, fave over pos. Now, the outcomes in a situation or problem are the different possible results. And you'll notice, there's the pos right there. Pos is the abbreviation for possible. What could possibly happen? When you roll a die, what could you get? You could get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All of those numbers are possible. If you have a bag with yellow, green, red, and blue marbles, then what's possible is the yellow, the red, the green, and the blue all together, all those marbles. Maybe there's 10 of each. That would mean there's 40 marbles in the bag. So what's possible is 40. Heads and tails. There's only 2 possibilities, heads or tails. That would be your number on the bottom, the 2. So the number of possibilities that you could get, not what you want to get, but what you could get. All right? All of those different outcomes, the collection, the group, the mass of them, is referred to as an event. An event is all the outcomes, the collection of all of them together. Favorable. Now if you look at this favorable, you'll notice FAV. FAV stands, that's the part of the fave. When we go back to the situation, fave stands for favorable. Favorable outcomes is what you want to have happen. So you've got that bag full of marbles, and it's got black and white marbles in it, and you really want a white marble. Well, the amount of white marbles in the bag represents the amount of favorable outcomes. All the black marbles are not favorable. All right? The white marbles would be the winner marbles, the black marbles would be the loser marbles in this case, and you want to figure out what's the probability that you'll pull that one out of there. You have to know how many you want, favorable, and put it over what you could get, possible. Now, I've said all this about probability, but in fact there's 2 forms of probability. One of the forms is known as theoretical probability, and that's the favorable over possible. Theoretical means it's in theory. In theory it should be this way. In theory, flipping a coin, you should get heads, tails, heads, tails, heads, tails, heads, tails. It should be nice and even. But you know that theoretically it doesn't always happen. You could flip the coins and get heads, 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 tails, heads, heads, tails, tails, heads, heads, tails, heads, tails, heads, 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 tails, tails, tails. It could be a whole gamut of different things. I will say that the more you do it, the closer and closer and closer it would actually get to 50-50. But it's possible that you could do theoretical probability, or you could come up with the calculations for probability, and it's not exactly the same. Theoretical is when it is a fair world. Everything's fair, everything has an equal chance of coming up. If I roll the dice, I should get 1 just as often as I get 5. So if I've rolled the dice and I've got a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4, and a 5, theoretical probability would state, by golly, I should get 6 just as many times, even though that doesn't always happen that way. So that's in theory. The other form is known as experimental probability. And this is where you actually conduct an experiment. You actually take a piece of paper and you go heads, tails. You take a coin and you flip it. Oh, heads. You flip it. Oh, heads. You flip it. Tails. Flip it. Tails. Flip it. Tails. Flip it. Heads. And you keep track of all of those. And you're like, boy, what was the experimental probability that I got heads? Well, you count up all the heads that you had, which in this case was 3, and you put it over the number of tries, which is 6. So 3 over 6 came out to 50-50. It might not always be that way. You might flip the coin and get a whole lot more heads or a lot more tails. Just depends. It's all part of the experiment. You're actually conducting an experiment. Number of trials is the amount of times you roll the dice, the number of times you pull the marble out of the bag, the number of times you flip the coin. Alright? This is the part that gets people a little confused, and it's known as odds. Odds is a comparison of the favorable to the non-favorable. In other words, the winners to the losers. Not the winners to the totals, like we did for probability, winners to losers, or what you want to what you don't want. When you have odds, just remember that you might have a situation where you want 7 of the things, and there are 15 in the bag. Maybe there's 7 white marbles, and there's a total of 15 marbles in the bag. If there's 7, I'm sorry, this would be, okay. For odds, 7 marbles you want and 15 marbles that you don't want. If you take these two and you put them together, 7 plus 15 will equal the total possible. Because if there's 7 winners and 15 losers, that means there's 22 possibilities. In other words, 22 possibilities. So now, if we wanted to do probability, probability is always what you want, which that's still the favorable, 7, but it's over what's possible. So these can be found from the same, I can take probability and I can find odds. I can take odds and I can find probability. People get very confused about these bottom numbers. Remember, winners to losers. Add up all the winners and the losers and you get the total amount of players. Probability is what you want, winners, out of all the players, possible. So just remember they're kind of the same. If you have probability and you're trying to figure out odds, you got to think that's what you want out of all of these. How many don't you want? Well, 22 minus 7 leaves you with 15. That's how you can find that bottom value.